Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's time for Preptober. It is time once again to get into our stories and get ready for our nano novels. Tonight, we are working on our world building again and creating an immersive world, building on the plotting and the character development, and going back to worlds so that we can interconnect them all so that they're strong. And that is how I believe that you create an immersive world. So, welcome everyone. Hi, Laura. Hi, Ash. Glad to have you here again tonight. And all of you in the future. If you don't know me, I'm Leslie. I don't know if I said that before. And if this is the first video that you're seeing, you probably want to hit the playlist and start from the beginning because, like I said, we're building on the stuff that we have been doing before. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about organization and story Bibles and how that helps us get ready and stay organized during NaNoWriMo, during the writing. We want to try to prepare as much as possible. And that is helpful for actually pushing us through. So, hi, Deb. How is everybody? How is your week going? Or how was your weekend? I guess it's Monday. I am always mystified as to what day it is. When you work for yourself, sometimes it's hard to keep track of all of the things. Like holidays. Someone was saying that their kids were out of school. And I was like, oh, is it a holiday? But I don't think it was. But yeah, good weekend. I didn't have any events this weekend. I had an interview, but it wasn't like a conference or like something that I've been doing a lot of recently. How's everyone's story coming also? How do you feel about being 8 days away from the beginning of NaNoWriMo? Are you feeling ready-ish? Less than ready? Super ready? Like, what did it rate your level of readiness? I love weekends where I don't touch my computer. That's like ideal. It's rare these days, but sometimes I do just unplug. I don't ever really check my work email. So even though I might be on the computer, I try to have a mental break from things. Hi, Megan. Oh, good. You caught up on the replays. Awesome. Hi, JC. Laura is feeling less than ready. I understand that. Deb, ready in your head, not on paper. Totally understandable. Megan is medium ready. Yeah, I feel like I'm medium ready. Like I think I do need to take this weekend and look at everything and focus for a few hours because I know that sometimes the things I say here, then I'll change my mind later and I may or may not announce that. But as I'm getting closer to feeling a higher level of readiness. Hi, Kathy. Kathy's 50% ready. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm just going to briefly kind of go over story Bibles. There is another video in my live section on the whole workshop on creating story Bibles if you want to dive into it. But we will be kind of going through adding things to the story Bible. And I want to make sure that everyone does it in a way that makes sense for them. So I'm going to be demoing the software Plotter tonight. You can, the other thing, I use Plotter sometimes for story Bibles, and that's come up before. I also use Scrivener a lot. For those of you writing in Scrivener, you can use Word, you can use pen and paper if that makes more sense. I don't recommend it, but for some people, really just need to write it down, however it works for you. So hopefully you can take the ideas that I'm sharing and apply it to your situation where you feel comfortable. If you want to use Plotter, I do like it, and I've decided to go ahead and use it for this project. I might also I'm going to write in Scrivener, but keep my character and location, story Bible information in Plotter right now. So, oh, Ash is going to take NaNoWriMo to make a final draft. That's cool. We have to make it work for us. Because often I'm not ready for our first draft in November. This has been the first time in several years when I'm actually attempting to do a brand new first draft in Nano. So we'll see how it goes. So there is a link in the description for the Story Bible guide. And that is, I will put it up on the screen too. The Story Bible guide is like a PDF. It's a free download that you can have to kind of my suggestions on how you can organize your Story Bible in a way that will hopefully be helpful and help us organize things so that the world, like I said, the world is feeding off of the character and the plot. So let's see. Okay. There's a little intro. There's 7 sections to it. It corresponds to the world building checklist that you may have downloaded also. And this is just kind of building it out. So these are the things that I like to put into the story Bible and keep on hand in a place that I'm accessing regularly, like either every day, every time I'm in the manuscript, every writing day, so that I can, if I'm keeping it like in Plotter, like this time, I'll just go back and forth. If it's in Scrivener, often it's in a separate Scrivener file anyway, so I'm going back and forth between my manuscript and all of this information. So, things that have been in worksheets that we've done before. I have the vision statement, a log line, and a blurb often. I don't know if we talked about blurbs, but writing the back cover copy before you begin can be super helpful. The outline, the synopsis, keeping a list of questions that come up as you're writing or as you're planning. So from now till I start writing, I'm going to, write down the questions that arise as I'm trying to build out the outline and the synopsis and get to a point where this is what I'm going to write. Ash says, I enjoy using Plotter and a notebook. The notebook's mainly because I get a break. Yes, I actually do both as well. So I have a digital version. I have a notebook. I have a folder for every book with printouts of the worksheets that I use, but I just have a regular Moleskine. I don't get into the whole planner crafty thing. I know a lot of people are into that, and I think that's great. For me, just a plain notebook, no lines on it, so I can just have the whole page to do whatever I want. I'm sketching things sometimes, I'm writing grids, I'm doing mind maps. But I do keep the bulk of the information. It's like I might start in the notebook and scribble notes, and when I've kind of made a decision, I move it to a digital format, which I find to be helpful. I like to keep a to-do list, and that's things that I know that I have to come back to. It's different than questions. It's like, oh, make sure that in the second draft, you go back and say this, and this, because the first draft is written without any editing. That's how I do it. I can't, if I edit while I do the first draft, it has never been a successful strategy for me. So that's why I keep a to-do list. Sometimes I'll even just write comments in the document using Scrivener's comment feature. You can do this in Word also. Highlight the text, make a comment, and be like, hey, when you come back to this next time in a few months or whenever you're revising, make sure you remember this or do this. Character list. All right, and then it kind of goes into different things to keep track of in the characters. I'm just going to go through this quickly. The groups, breaking out the aspects of the groups, which in this story that I'm writing, we've got our warriors who are called omens, and they're a group. The demons are a group, and they've got their own social structure. They've got their own government. They might not have climate and geography, although the demon realm is probably going to have their own climate, but that might not be relevant to the story because I don't know if we're going to actually visit that realm. So all of these things for the groups, there's the witches, there's fairies, there's other supernatural creatures. These are all groups. Laura asks, do I use a specific type of notebook? I do. I buy them in bulk. I use the Moleskine. I think they're called the Cahiers. It's like a beautiful French word. I will, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, so I put stickers on them. It's just, I use the craft, blank inside. Oops, sorry about the mic. And then, like I said, I use this, there's this size, which is a little smaller than letter. And then I use also a bigger size. I bought them accidentally and I actually liked the bigger size, but like I said, I buy them in bulk. So these are my favorite and I customize them. Sometimes, a series will have many of these notebooks. Just a preference. World building details also go into the story Bible. And this is just kind of a recap of the things that are on the checklist with a few extra questions to dive into. And at this stage of the game, I'm really only doing things that are important, that impact the plot. So in the first draft, I'm not going to know the names of the plants. Like even when I'm writing in our world, regardless of whether I'm doing a speculative world or our world, I don't know a lot about plants. So I was the manuscript I just turned in, which takes place in our world, um, in an analog to Alabama. The first draft was just plant, like literally, she walks by tree, and then second draft is when I sort of researched, okay, what trees are in Alabama, and which plants are going to be by the river. In this, even though I made up the name of the river, so uh, this in where I am now, plants and agriculture, I don't think are a part of the story at all. So they probably will be just blank. Now, animals and creatures might be a bigger part of the story and they might affect the plot and the characters. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time thinking about them. Food, right now, I don't think it's going to be super important, although maybe it is. Religion, language and lingo, naming things is going to be a little bit important. Um, Sports, games, leisure, that's kind of stuff I'll figure out as I go. Now, transportation technology, we're going to talk a little bit about that. History, calendar, a calendar is super important. I often do my calendar by hand just because it's easier to just print out a blank calendar, just a blank grid, and write things, usually in pencil or in the lovely friction erasable colored pens, which I love because I like to color code lots of things. But I tend to do that first draft by hand and then put it into the computer. And then, of course, places and magic systems. So we will come back to this in a second. All right, let's go into Plotter. And this is good. Deb says that my first draft will likely end up as a very extensive outline. That is, some people's first drafts are essentially like, some people write them as like scripts where it's all dialogue. Some people write them, as kind of bigger outlines, and because you're telling yourself the story in the first draft. So, and then there's some writers who can write a very clean first draft and it looks beautiful and it's going to be very similar to the last draft. My first drafts and my last drafts are, the story is the same, but the words are all different. So I just started this morning a revision on the book I had been fast drafting that I'll be revising during NaNoWriMo while I'm drafting this. And yeah, I revised the first chapter, the prologue actually, and I kept maybe like 2 sentences of the original. So if you know how you write, then your first draft might just be something that's very just getting the story out, just vomiting it out onto the page. I learned about friction pens when I got a Rocketbook. I bought a Rocketbook many years ago on like a Kickstarter or something. And Rocketbooks, if you don't know, they're these notebooks that, originally you could like erase the notebook in the microwave. And I love gadgets. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. It took me like 10 years to fill the notebook because I didn't write in it very often. But because it's heat sensitive, yeah, very cool. Any kind of writing papery gadget, I am going to be a fan of. All right, so I was getting into Plotter. So I've started my Plotter. I've seeded it with some things, and we can kind of go through how I think about that. So if you're not familiar, there's different views inside of Plotter across the tabs. So this is my story. I haven't given it a title exactly. I give it a genre, and this is where I just pasted in the log line. So this is a lonely woman discovers she's a supernatural creature, just something so that you know what it is. I decided to use a template for the actual scene cards, although I have not filled them out yet. But since I do want this to be a romance and I have not been focusing on the romance as of yet, in this next pass of the outline, I'm going to be focusing on the romance. So this is using the Romancing the Beat. You can see the different templates that they have over here for various plotting styles. They have genre, mystery, horror, romance, limericks. I don't know what that is. And we talked about the 7-point plot structure. They've got that in here too, if you liked that. They've got Save the Cat somewhere. And yeah, it's a cool tool. So Deb asks, do I still use my free write? I use my free write every time I do a first draft. So absolutely. I actually have 2 free writes, and these are the dedicated writing machines. One I don't use, that is decorative somewhere. I forget where it is. It's around here somewhere. But I use the free write Traveler, which is the small clamshell one. And yeah, just because I like not being distracted when I'm doing a first draft, it's incredibly important to my process. When my free write needs to be charged or I can't find it or something, I still use the Alpha Smart, which is the original $50 version that you can get on eBay. Still works really well. I like my free write. It is overly expensive, and so if it's not in the budget, I don't recommend it. But if it is in the budget, it's very cool and helpful. My remarkable, yeah, I'm just a wealth of writing gadgetry. So if you want recommendations on some sort of cool gadget, let me know. The cards automatically turn into the outline. Now here is where I use Plotter for the story Bible. I'm generally in the notes, characters, and places sections. So in the story Bible guide, there's a section for planning. So I reproduce that over here. Let me get myself out of the way. Okay, so over here we have planning, and I've input the character list. I've got my list of warriors, other people, antagonists, just kind of things that I've brainstormed and I think I'm going to do, and they're grouped here. So I have the log line in here that I have pasted in for my workbook and actually modify the log line as I've been refining and revising the story and figuring out what's happening. There's no synopsis yet, but that would go here. And then the vision statement, which is we talked about in the very first episode of this video series. Then I created another category called groups. So let's say I have witches here. I know witches are a part of this world, and I'm just brain dumping the things I know right now, the ideas that have come to me about witches. So I'm going to make another group, just make a new file here, and it's about the omens. And the omens are the warriors. We put them in the category of groups. If there was some kind of inspirational image, I would put that here. And I would add, what do I know about these omens? So I like to do it in bullets, but they are half human, half demon warriors created to fight evil demons. Because in this world, there are evil demons and not so evil demons. There's the demons that are kind of, they've been turned. I might put something about their powers. But yeah, fill that out there. I add another one for demons, and I know that demons can be killed with a substance called demon strife that they make into swords. Well, they don't make it, but it is made into swords. The purpose of killing them. So that's their weakness. Demon strife is the weakness. I probably put in a section about powers. I might do something interesting with that. I'm not sure yet, and make sure I put the category in planning. So I would continue in order to make a new group. So I have my history groups, planning. If I want to do more world building stuff in Plotter, add a category, and I'll just add world. And now when I add a new note, I can give it that category. So let's say I want to talk about, games and leisure or something. And I would give it the world, and I'd make up some game name that they all like to play. Something that's going to be like, I might use something that I've used in another book, but a totally unrelated book. But I like to have little tiny Easter egg type things that connect books that don't seem to be connected. So I have to go back and look at what the game name was in Song of Blood and Stone, or that series, because that's probably I would put that in this like a little Easter egg for readers. Like, did you catch that? Will anyone notice? I like doing stuff like that. Thanks, Megan. Megan says that demon strife is a great word. I don't know where I came up with that, but I was like, yes, that sounds awesome. It's been in my head for a long time. All right, so I'm gonna just put a note to myself here to that game name from Mercer. I'd probably just color code that so I would remember that is a note for me and not an actual thing about this world. So that's an easy way to use Plotter to categorize things in your world that you're figuring out. I started, writing the backstory of the world and just in text here. and made a character list like I showed you before. You could also, add the books, the characters. You can kind of cross-link things, which I find is actually really helpful in a story Bible to cross-link things. Um, Scrivener allows you to do this as well, so that's why it's another good tool. And then under characters, I just put in our heroine, whose name is now Aster. I think I like that. It could still change. Who knows? And if there's anything interesting about her. Now, it also has custom attributes, which you can configure, and you can create add templates. Now, there's a template that I use that I have saved in my plotter, which I'll probably just go ahead and use that since it seems reasonable to me. And I think we were talking about she was like in her early 30s. I think I wrote that down somewhere else, but let's say she's 31. And then when I figure out, what year this is, I would put in date of birth. I have this information in the character workbook. I'd bring that in. And we talked about Enneagrams before, her personal history, all that stuff would be included here. And then building out the other characters. And in the same way, creating categories for them so that, you can't see that, can you? With this drop down just has main characters, supporting characters. Yeah, so that is the basic idea of that. And places, I created the town. So this is like a small town, kind of cozy fantasy I'm trying to create. So Everhollow, a small town in the middle of nowhere, is a main location. I might either look for an image on like Pinterest or try to create something in Midjourney, one of the AI image creation programs for inspiration, so that I can have a visual of what this place might look like. Any questions about building out your story Bible in something like Plotter or however you want to do it? You can obviously, take these concepts, create little templates for yourself if you're using Word. I know that some other people were using other writing software. There's a lot out there. There's also, the dedicated story Bible software like Campfire and World Anvil. Those are things that I played around with them, but I don't use regularly. Okay. The other thing that goes into that you would do in terms of using this world building to help with the plot, help with the outline, is really delving into the whys of the characters. So I like to, at this stage, building out the world is really asking a bunch of questions. It's diving deep into the motivation and the backstory. So I was filling out my world history, and I'd been up, with ideas, dictating them into my phone. I'm putting them here so they're all in one place because at this point things are a little bit scattered. I've got different workbooks, I've got notebooks, I've got things in my phone, the text file, like I said, I was dictating. And so some of them conflict. Some of the ideas that I've had that I've been developing, I don't like anymore. So another thing that I would add at some place here, and probably in the notes feature, would be the fixed points. So I'm just going to put it in the planning and create something called fixed points. And that is sort of like the non-negotiables. Like I'm changing things a lot, but it goes back to why did you want to create the story in the first place? And I do tend to change my mind, especially at this stage, and even all through the first draft. It's like discovering what the story wants to be, what do I want to talk about, and sometimes that changes from planning to actual implementation. And you start drafting, and then it goes way left. And I think you kind of have to follow it to a certain degree, follow where the story leads you, because that's sometimes like there's sometimes when it's just going to be completely insane, and developing your judgment as a writer is a big part of the entire process. But that is why I do something like a fixed points. So we have the vision statement, which kind of encapsulates, what you want the story to be. just to review it. I want to write a story about a young woman who's taken from her life of drudgery into a magical world full of mystery and wonder and discover something important about herself and her origin. And so within that, my fixed points might be, it's definitely a love story. So there's definitely going to be, the love story elements. And that's another reason why at this stage, going to Romancing the Beat or one of the romance beat sheets is going to be really important for me where I'm at. I like the small town element, and then kind of bringing in also found family. And those are different things, but they're connected because I want something about going from isolation to connection. And that's kind of like a theme. So if my main character, Aster, she starts out completely isolated, wanting a family. She gets incorporated into this family of demon warriors, but also they're in this small town. And I think the warriors aren't really integrated into the town. So these are kind of building upon the same elements. And this is kind of also how, if you don't know your theme going in, if you figure out what are the things I really care about in the story, that can give you an idea. The theme is sort of emerging out of the fixed points that I don't want to change. I might change other things. I've gone back and forth with different ideas about the backstory and the mythology, like, of these supernatural characters, the magic. We haven't talked about magic system, and I want to do that. But yeah, um, this is showing me that kind of my theme is about isolation to connection, and which is a theme that I'm always writing about, honestly. Like, it's not news to me, although I might not have articulated it in this way with the story. But if I look at everything I write, it's kind of about the same thing. And you might have that too. Like, if you dig deep enough into your writing, there are things that you care about as a human being that are just coming through in the work. And it can be good to know that and to put that into words. Okay. I'm trying to think if there are any other fixed points that I know that I want. Um, these are kind of the big ones. If there's any scenes that you've already, like, you're excited to write and you know that you want certain scenes, they can definitely go on the timeline, but they can also kind of go in fixed points. And that's just a suggestion that I found helpful. So let's go ahead and make a new note for the magic system. This is something that I am still not sure about in terms of my story. I'll put it in world. Now, in notes, you can't really create templates, but if I go back to, I'm looking at the magic part of the Story Bible and Organization Guide. And if you are writing a speculative story, put this on the screen. These are the ways that I have found is useful to talk about magic and how to develop a magic system. So, it has a name or not. It could just be called magic, or it could have a special name. I think mine is gonna have a special name. I just like that. I like giving things names. Active or passive, that's a good question. There's gonna be multiple systems because we have witches who are going to be more active, and then there are creatures like fairies and demons who are passive. Like, they might have to try to do something specific, but their magic is part of them. It's inborn, as opposed to a witch who is a human who is going to manipulate nature, the world, materials of some kind in order to create magic. So that kind of, an active and passive also just means, are you trying or do you just exude magic wherever you go? So the source, internal or external, whether it is inborn or you need cauldron, spell, herbs, rubies, or whatever you have to use to create it. The technique is generally broken down into thought, speech, gesture, and or material, any combination of these things. The range, how far does it go? The effect, what does it actually do? The cost, it's generally thought of these days, magic should have a cost. I think that's, if you don't have a cost, it's a you can look at older books where that wasn't necessarily the case. Um, Education, how do they learn it? What are its properties and its limitations? And then also, how are the magic users thought of? So in earlier versions of this, I was thinking that the world at large, humanity, did not know about magic, but I've changed that. I think I'm doing more of a second world fantasy parallel to our own world, but caught in another time period. And people know about these creatures, but there's still some level of secrecy. Like they know there's a level of knowledge that everyone has, and then there are the secrets that are kept by the witches and the omens and everybody who interacts with them. So that's something that I would think about. So I would probably copy all of that into Plotter and just start building it out. Probably put it in bullet points or make my own like little version of a template and have that in my story Bible. Any questions so far about anything that we have been talking about? The last thing that I would think about in terms of the world and everything is culture, customs, and rules. So culture is important to the characters and to the world. And let's see, where am I? A lot of the world stuff just is kind of bound up into culture and customs and all of that. So, kind of heading back here, looking through where is there opportunity for conflict, where is there opportunity for to solve the conflict, what questions do I need to know and answer in order to build this out and figure out what's happening. I don't know if, let's see, if the comments stopped or y'all just didn't have anything to say. Because I never know if there's like a tech problem or if it's me. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions about this or about using Plotter or just creating a story Bible in general. Okay. Or if you're confused, if you're like, what are you talking about, Leslie? Like, I don't know what's happening here at all. So yeah, I think at this point, it's kind of just like figuring out what you need to know in order to start writing on November 1st and building the outlines, fleshing it out, writing out a synopsis if that is how it helps to think about it. Ash asks, when do you know that the Bible is enough? That I don't think about it as enough. I mean, it's only there for you at this point. So when do you feel confident that you know enough to at least start the story? Like you're not going to know everything. There's going to be a lot of holes because you haven't written it yet. But I would keep filling out the Bible as I'm writing out the either outline or synopsis until I have something that feels workable that I can actually go in and start writing scenes. So that's kind of the roundabout answer that, you don't want it to be super. I hesitate to say that, but I would think that, I would be wary of having it be super detailed right now because you kind of experience the story as you're writing it and things might shift and change. But some people are able to hold the story a lot more closely in their minds than other people. So I would do a pass or two and, make a note of things that you have no idea of and, keep a questions file. And I think that, you don't want to, Nano is good because there's specific dates. If you're writing just in general, it is very easy to spend a lot of time on the story Bible, a lot of time getting everything together and never writing. And we don't want that. So I think it's enough when you have like the minimum that you need to write the first draft. That would be my suggestion. And if you do that and it doesn't work, then everybody might need a little bit more, but I would start there. Do you have any tips when you start feeling overwhelmed by the detailed versions of your story in Story Bible? Um, yeah, it can be if you're making a lot of changes, and it is easy to get overwhelmed. I think if you're always bring it back to the grounding factor of the story and getting to the end, getting to a finished draft at some point, like a finished first draft and then a finished second draft. So is the work that you're doing helping you to get there? Or does it feel like it is procrastination sometimes, Um, because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to just do some more work and research, the grocery stores, and then research does their electricity come from, and how is it powered, and you can get into details that do you really need to know that right now? Like maybe, but maybe not. I go back to the idea of sort of like, what is the minimum I need to know in order to write the story? And that can be helpful when you're falling down rabbit holes, and also, do you have to know it for the first draft? Is it a detail that you can have a placeholder and then come back in the second draft and fill it in? Because sometimes when we're overwhelmed by detail, we don't get to the end, and we don't get to the rest of the writing. Any other questions? I hope that helps. And I can teach you my process, and you like take it in and see what works for you, because I know that people do come at it from very, very different perspectives and different ways that work for them. And I don't want to make anyone's process worse. Like, these are ideas, try it. If you're really getting overwhelmed, like one thing about the decisions which is why I started doing the fixed points, because I would be like, I don't know, like what is that? Like, so many decisions that you're making and you have no idea how to decide. Like, decision fatigue is a real thing. And so if I know that it has to come back to love story, small town, found family, isolation, and connection, do these things help that spine, that backbone of the story? Do they strengthen that, or are they completely unrelated? And to look really carefully at things that are completely unrelated to the parts of the story that you really want to tell, and the parts of the story that you're excited about, and the vision statement that you made about what this is about. Because a lot of times, things that take us off track are not contributing to that. So that's another way. I try to build in things that will ground me up front, knowing that when you're in it, when you're deep in it, it can be a huge mess. It can just be like this chaotic ball of nonsense that is coming out of your brain. And so step back, take a look at the vision statement, take a look at like, okay, why am I writing this story? What is this really about? Who are these characters? What do they want? Go back to the motivations of the characters and, their inner and outer goals. These are things that always, especially even when I get stuck writing, it's because I've veered away from that, or I didn't know enough about them, or, I just kind of got lost in some other side quest or something like that. There is, I don't know if I can find it. I have all these note cards on my desk with like things to remember. And there's one that's from Lisa Crone that I thought was super helpful. If I can find it. Oh yeah. It's from Story Genius by Lisa Crone. And she says, it's the constant laser beam focus on your protagonist's story-specific inner struggle that will keep you from allowing surface storylines to hijack the story you're telling. And that was super helpful for me, because going back to the protagonist's story-specific inner struggle, That's why I could do the character and the plot and kind of go back and forth to make sure that the plot actions lead back to the character's inner journey and their arc. And even if it's a flat arc, even if your character is not changing, I know we talked about that. If you're doing a series and there's tiny changes, or there's very little change, there's some kind of goal. Even if it's all external, like a mystery or something, they have got to find. Even a mystery though is usually motivated by some sort of inner struggle. They have to solve the crime. We talked about James Scott Bell and Write Your Novel from the Middle. He talks about death stakes. Every stake is a death stake. It's either physical, psychological, or professional. And so a flat character arc, or a character who's not changing very much, might still have a professional death. If they're a detective, if they don't solve the crime, who are they? What kind of detective are they? That's a professional death. Psychological death. If I don't find out who killed my brother, who am I as a person? I don't know who I am. I must avenge this. I must figure this out. That is psychological death as a stake. And so maybe this character's not changing a whole lot, but that struggle is still there. Everything comes back to, can I do this? Who am I? What happens if I fail? This version of death, that is the stakes, will consume me. So that's an idea that come back to when I'm feeling lost, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like I can't make a decision. Cut out all the things that don't belong. Cut out all the things that don't go back to this idea, this core. So next time we meet, we're going to look at individual scenes. How do you plan scenes? And a little bit more on like backwards outlining, and then opening and closing plot loops. But yeah, thinking about your scenes ahead of time, getting to a point where you at least know, an overview of what you're going to be writing. That really, like, knowing what you're going to write before you write it, if you are someone who has not successfully completed NaNoWriMo before, that is the biggest tip is, obviously you have to write as close to every day as possible, or, you could be a binge writer maybe, but in 30 days, if it's something that's been difficult to accomplish, either the day before or up front somehow before you do it, or the moment before, like when you sit down to write that day, plan what you're going to write. So that's what we're talking about on a Wednesday if you're joining us live. The next video if you are watching the replay. And did I have any other announcements? I don't think so. Like I said before, I think I mentioned in the last video, we'll be doing live write-ins at the same time during November. So if you're not already on the reminders newsletter at myimaginaryfriends.net/nano, which should be linked, then make sure you're on that so you get all of those links and all of that information. And I talked about this on my podcast. I think I will be doing a revision course in January. So we'll write November, take December off, come back in January and revise. And that is my current plan. So thanks a lot, everybody. And yeah, if you are any last minute questions, let me know. But otherwise, I will see you in the next video, and good luck with all of your preparations between now and then. Only a few days left. We can do it. We can get this done. We can get a higher level of readiness than we feel now. If we're at a 50, let's try to get to like a 75. If we're at a 20, let's get to a 50. Let's just move forward, make some progress, and then we can get this done together. Thanks, y'all. Have a good evening or wherever you are, and I'll talk to you next time.